waiting on a few more of our audience members to arrive, but in order to keep on time for everyone, we might begin. First of all, I would like to thank you all for being here as part of our audience today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your company, and also to my esteemed panellists, whom I'll introduce to you very shortly. Thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Melinda Nusofora. I am a correspondent and a presenter for TRT World, based here in Istanbul. But as you might pick up from my accent, I'm originally from Australia, so a long way from home, but very pleased to be here with you all. Today we are discussing not the easy topic of democratic governance and security, and I think given what is happening in the world at the moment, particularly in Ukraine, this discussion couldn't come at a more relevant time. Since 1990, the Journal of Democracy has been examining the structure of governments around the world. For 3 decades, they've been taking the temperature, so to speak, of democracy. But the title of their 25th anniversary report was "Is Democracy in Decline?" Now, this is a decidedly pro-democratic, internationally recognised journal, but it was a surprise to a lot of people when they saw the title of that edition. But it's a question they felt they really needed to ask, and one they couldn't ignore. The Journal of Democracy, in their recent publications, has gone as far as to question whether democracy is still viewed as the global standard of political legitimacy and as the best system of governance for achieving prosperity and effective government. Now, these are the difficult questions I have for our esteemed panellists today. So let me introduce you to them. First of all, Shirley Ayokor Botchwey is Ghana's Minister for Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration. Beside her, we have Narayan Khadka, Nepal's Minister for Foreign Affairs. Hassoumi Massoudou from Niger, the Minister for State, Foreign Affairs and Cooperation. And Susie Kala Barbosa, Guinea-Bissau's Minister for State, Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and Communities. If we could give them all a warm welcome, thank you. Just as a note, Ms. Barbosa has a high-level meeting at midday, so she will be excusing herself from our panel a little bit early, and so allow me to take this earlier opportunity to say thank you for your participation. With that in mind, I might direct my first question to you, Ms. Barbosa, because, unfortunately, Guinea-Bissau has the most recent experience with coups, which really do pose such a challenge to not just established democracies, but perhaps particularly to fledgling democracies. So let me start by asking you the question that a lot of people have been asking in this past year: are coups contagious?
Thank you very much for the opportunity and for the question. Unfortunately, I must tell you that in the case of Guinea-Bissau, it seems that the coups are contagious. And why do I say this? I have with me some colleagues of the sub-region from ECOWAS that Guinea-Bissau belongs to. It's a sub-regional organization with 15 countries, and we are one of the members. What has happened in the last years in ECOWAS is completely different from what had happened in the past, that it was considered a region of quite stability, political stability. So recently in our sub-region, we've been having quite a lot of coup d'etat attempts, starting by the situation of Mali, that was followed up by Guinea-Conakry, then Burkina Faso, and Guinea-Bissau would be probably the 4th coup attempt in that sub-region. For our sake, it was not concreted. They tried to kill the president on the 1st of February this year. It was a 5-hour shooting that he could come, thank God, alive, and at the moment the stability of the country is in risk. But we know this is especially not only because of the influence of what happened in the other countries, but also because of the fight the president has been doing to the narco-traffics. Guinea-Bissau has been a country that has been used in the last years for narco-traffickers to introduce drugs from South America to Europe. So the fight he's been doing against this traffic and the fight he's been doing against corruption was not well seen by the people that have benefits from this. So we believe that this coup attempt was also a push from these people that want to see him out in order not to have people fighting this kind of situation.
To Mr. Masoodou, I mean, from 2000 to 2020, I think there were on average about 2 coups per year in Africa, but in 2021, there were 8, either successful or attempted. What do you think? Does geography play a part? If there is a coup in a neighbouring country, does that give people more courage to perhaps conduct it themselves? To you, sir. Yes.
Nos pays sont des pays jeunes, venus récemment à la démocratie. Notre histoire, depuis l'indépendance, a été caractérisée par la prévalence de régimes autoritaires. Donc la norme pour les populations, c'est les régimes autoritaires issus du coup d'État militaire. La démocratie est un phénomène relativement récent. Et évidemment, pour un pays comme le Niger, c'est à partir des années 90. Et même à partir de là, nous avons eu des va-et-vient. Donc la démocratie dans nos pays jeunes, arriver jeune à la démocratie, est toujours en questionnement. C'est pour cela qu'il faut forcément, nécessairement, faire attention à la petite flamme. Il faut tout le temps l'attiser pour que la flamme continue à grandir, pour qu'elle s'établisse. Et cette flamme, pour l'arroser, pour la faire se maintenir, il faut approfondir la démocratie, fortifier les institutions, faire fonctionner les institutions, et que les peuples s'habituent à voir qu'on peut à la fois être libre et efficace du point de vue du développement, du point de vue économique. Donc c'est ça les différents enjeux. Évidemment, chaque fois que les règles du jeu ne sont pas bien respectées, chaque fois que l'état de droit même est insuffisant, parce que les peuples sont très exigeants vis-à-vis des régimes démocratiques, plus que vis-à-vis des autres. Et c'est par l'exigence vis-à-vis de nous-mêmes, par l'efficacité de nos institutions et par les effets sociaux et économiques que les régimes démocratiques peuvent donner que cette démocratie se consolide. Mais quand nous sommes face à une situation comme ça se passe dans le Sahel, la plupart de ces pays, à part le nôtre aujourd'hui, sont sous des régimes de dictature militaire, c'est l'échec parfois de ces mêmes militaires dans la lutte contre l'insécurité et les insuffisances des institutions qui amènent effectivement l'appel de certaines fractions de la société à des régimes autoritaires. Voilà pourquoi nous avons des coups d'État. Mais très rapidement, les peuples se désillusionnent parce que les mêmes problèmes, les dictatures militaires ne peuvent pas faire face à ça. Donc il y a une désillusion et généralement il y a un recul par rapport à tous les engagements qu'ils ont pris, notamment l'engagement de défendre la sécurité du pays. C'est ainsi qu'on a vu dans certains pays, à chaque fois qu'il y a un coup d'État, le terrorisme se développe davantage, les échecs se multiplient et on approche d'une situation de chaos. Donc voilà notre lecture. Mais nous pensons dans l'espace CEDEAO, comme disait ma collègue, nous avons fait le pari d'avoir un espace constitué de 15 États. Ce pari, c'est que le paradigme accepté par nous tous au sein de la communauté de l'ECOWAS, de la CEDEAO, c'est que tous ces États, la norme soit la démocratie. Et c'est pourquoi il y a des principes qui sont établis, il y a des critères qui sont là, que nous allons continuer à approfondir pour que les institutions soient solides et pour qu'il y ait un attrait de la démocratie au niveau de nos peuples. Voilà le paradigme sur lequel se construit cet espace démocratique de 15 États. Voilà, madame.
Thank you very much. I'm going to direct my next question to you, Ms. Botchouet. Ghana is considered one of the most stable countries in West Africa. So is this a case that bad governance is at the root of an unstable, even new democracy? Or is it that perhaps people are disenchanted with what they see from their governments when democracy is promised, and perhaps it doesn't deliver what they expect it to be.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be part of this panel discussion. I must say from the onset that there is no justification to stage a coup, especially a coup by the military in any country, because the military have a clear-cut role and there is no need for them to enter into the space of governance. Nothing can justify a coup, whether it's an economy that is failing, whether it's bad governance, whether it's corruption, so on and so forth. And so I think that that must be made very clear to all. We have all, and I use the example of West Africa, the ECOWAS region, we have all signed on to democracy. We have all signed on to, in our case, to a supplementary protocol on democracy and good governance. All signatories of the 15 countries. And so we are committed as 15 countries and even as African countries to democracy, which means that we go every so often to the ballot to speak our minds. And that is where we decide that this government A or government B is not performing to our expectations, and therefore we must change these governments. And that is what we have all agreed through our constitutions to do. And so there is nothing like a justification. However, if you take the issue of West Africa, we are in a region close to the Sahel with violent extremism, with terrorism. We have a very youthful population in the whole of Africa. Over 60% are under 35, and the issue of jobs and all of that, and these are all issues that people may claim to use as that catalyst to stage coups. But I think that we have institutions, and Ghana is one typical example that has institutions. We've had our past of coups, and we have decided through the Fourth Republic that we will go the way of democracy, and we have changed governments through the ballot. And so it's something that is doable, it can be done, and all countries should do it. But let me say that we cannot just generalize that Africa, there's so many coups in Africa. Africa has 54 countries. Unfortunately, yes, like you've just said, about 8 or so in the last few years have gone that way. But that's not to generalize that this is what is happening all over. 15 countries in West Africa, 3 unfortunately, but I don't think that generalization is something that should be made, because most of the countries are adhering to democracy, which they've signed on to.
Do you think that that generalization, whether it be from the media or otherwise, is damaging? Does it encourage instability?
Well, I think it does. It does because I've mentioned the issues with the instability that is happening around us, which is not our doing, instability that has happened from other parts of the world, and which has come into the African region in terms of the terrorists coming into Libya, the fall of Gaddafi, spreading of arms into other parts of the region. Then the impatience of the youth to be able to contribute to governance, as well as to be able to, for governments to provide the needs of the youth. So these are some of the things that probably have been used by the media and unfortunately social media as well. And so news spreads, misinformation spreads, a lot of untruths are spread, and it even goes towards making governments even more unpopular than they should be. And unfortunately, misinformation spreads very fast and it creates problems.
It does indeed. Mr. Khadkar, I am going to come to you very shortly, but I want to ask one more question to Ms. Barbosa before we lose her at midday. So bear with me. Ms. Barbosa, before we do lose you to the President of Turkey, which I guess is not, we can't begrudge her for that, I just wanted to ask you, do you think that sanctions against a military coup, international isolation, is that enough to deter military or other members of a government from overthrowing their elected powers? And also, what do you think Guinea-Bissau needs to do to stabilise itself going forward? What lessons can perhaps other countries learn?
Thank you very much once again for the opportunity. As far as concerns to Guinea-Bissau, I think what we've seen that we do need stronger institutions. We do need to have a more democratic organization. Guinea-Bissau is a country that it's very young. It has only 48 years. But in these 48 years, unfortunately, we have lived several coup attempts and very violent situations. But I think that with the opportunity of strengthening our institution, this will help stop this kind of coup attempts, and it will be able to have a longer stability. In what concerns to putting sanctions, I think they are needed, because this is what we are doing really in our sub-region. It's a way of dissuading, it's a way of them thinking we cannot go doing whatever we want and we don't have any objections. So we can't really fight the countries that are doing this coup attacks, so the only way of us reacting is by this sanction, and it's exactly what we have been doing in the ECOWAS. We've been putting sanctions to these countries that are not respecting the rules of law, because when they were member parts of the ECOWAS, they have signed an agreement that says that they have to respect these pillars of democracy. So they cannot come to power through a coup. They have to wait for the ballots for the votes. So what's been happening is that we've decided that we are putting economical sanction to this country in order for them to realize it's not a benefit to make coup d'etat. If you don't do so, it will not be possible to stop them, because as you say, it can even be contagious, because everybody says they've done it, there's nothing, so we can also do the same. I think it's one of the options, and I think this is what Europe's making too, because if we realize what's happening between Russia and Ukraine, the reaction of Europe is actually putting economical sanctions to Russia in order to make them realize that we're not with you and you cannot go on doing something that we don't agree with you. I think this is it. Thank you.
Thank you, it's a good point. Mr. Khadkar, I'll come to you now. Nepal has had 28 governments in 31 years, and more than 30% of Nepalese are at risk of falling into absolute poverty. Do you think that unstable governments cause economic instability, or are they a result of unstable governments? Just press your little button on the front there.
You refer to the article published in the Journal of Democracy, but there are numerous other institutes which have presented their conclusion on the prospect of democracy in the world. Most of them have said that the democracy is backsliding, it is in retreat. So it is a matter of concern for all of us, for all the democratic countries, for all the people of the democratic countries. Yes, we had many governments in the last 30 years. If you go back to 1951 till last few months, there were some 53 governments in almost 50 years. So I think one government per year. Before 1990, there was a conflict of interest between the monarchy and the political parties. Every time democracy is restored in the country, the king besieged democratic order, dissolved the parliament, imprisoned political leaders, and then we had to fight back again to restore democracy in the country. That way, since 1989, we had we had reintroduced democracy in the country, and it functioned for some years. And again, in 2002-3, the then king again dissolved the parliament and took absolute power in his hand. And then again we had to fight. So, the Nepali people are fighting and fighting to restore democracy in the country ever since 1951. Nepal is a soft state in the sense that the institutions are very weak. Of course, poverty and unemployment are very high, and it also causes a heavy toll on the functioning of the democracy. Laws are passed, but they're not fully implemented in their full spirit. Also, there are many actors, there are many players in the political arena, and those actors, those players in politics, they all want power, and the politics now is the focus of power for everyone, because there are no big businesses, there are no big industries, so everyone tries to have some chunk of the political pie and take advantage out of that, and then that creates a lot of pressure for the political system to function, and as a result of that, the government of the day cannot really function as it had committed to the people, and on the other hand, the people become more and more impatient. They have no time to wait for fulfilling their basic aspirations. So, on the one hand is instability causes poverty to be heightened. Instability in politics and government leads to more unemployment and more economic hardship for the people. And if there is more hardship, more economic problems the people face, it also creates spaces. It's a two-way traffic between the two factors. There is a causality between the two elements. So the challenge for us is how to provide a very stable government. For that, we have to make a lot of compromises. The government and the political parties have to have a basic understanding as to how best they can deliver, how best they can cater to the needs of the public. Unless that is achieved, I think the uncertainty in the government hangs very high. And yes, even now, like, we have political parties, but then political parties are diametrically opposed to each other. We have some center-right party, we have far-left parties, very radical parties like the Maoist party, as you know by the name. And so the tussle for power between those diametrically opposed political parties also creates instability in the government, because to come back to power, they have to make all kinds of empty promises which they can fulfill, and as a result of that, there is frustration in the psyche of the people, and also those political parties which are restless to grab power, they also play in force, full to take back the power, and then this way a very unhealthy competition has been prevailing in the political system of Nepal, and that's why the causality between instability and the economic hardship is one of the most important factors in the instability of Nepal's government.
It is. People want to see. Thank you so much. We'll thank you for your participation, Susie. We'll see you soon. Mr. Masaldu, if I can direct another question to you. Niger recently had a thwarted coup attempt just days before inaugurating their new president in 2021. Do you think that for a new democracy, as our colleague from Nepal was just discussing, that if people aren't seeing an economic benefit or an immediate benefit from democracy, they get disillusioned by it? how difficult is it for a new democracy? I mean, we saw what happened in Tunisia. People became disillusioned very quickly. What do you think needs to be done to encourage people that this is the right way to go?
Merci, Madame. La tentative de coup d'État dans mon pays était intervenue à la veille de l'investiture du nouveau président. Donc, mais c'était un phénomène assez marginal, hein, c'était un petit groupe de militaires. Ce qu'il faut retenir en Afrique, c'est que la tendance lourde est à la démocratie quand même, malgré tout, malgré les quelques coups d'État que nous avons. Évidemment, c'est ce qui ne marche pas qu'on constate. Ce qui marche, on n'en parle pas. Aujourd'hui, le Niger est dans le Sahel est un îlot de stabilité démocratique dans un environnement de coups d'État et de régime militaire, dans tout le Sahel, sauf nous. Nous nous battons pour démontrer qu'on peut être à la fois un État démocratique, un État de droit, un État stable et en même temps vaincre le terrorisme. Parce que la caractéristique de cette région, c'est le terrorisme qui nous est venu d'abord de Libye et ensuite dans le cœur et aujourd'hui au Mali. Nous nous battons dans ce contexte-là en ne renonçant ni au développement ni à nos institutions démocratiques. Voilà le challenge dans lequel nous sommes et je pense que nous allons vaincre parce que tous les peuples aspirent au bien-être. Et la démocratie et la liberté sont un des éléments clés fondamentaux du bien-être des populations. À chaque fois qu'il y a un recul démocratique, quelques années après, vous voyez les gens dans la rue contre les militaires, contre la dictature militaire. Donc la tendance lourde est celle-là. Mais dans le monde aujourd'hui, au-delà de l'Afrique, on voit bien quelques attraits avec une forte propagande pour les régimes autoritaires. On l'a vu aux États-Unis, même dans des pays avec 200 ans de pratiques démocratiques institutionnelles, nous avons vu à la veille de la proclamation du résultat du président Biden une réaction autoritaire. Donc c'est pour dire que la démocratie est toujours et partout une quête permanente, une quête de bien-être permanent. Et c'est pour cela que dans nos pays comme ailleurs, il faut toujours se battre pour que les idées de bien-être, les idées de démocratie, les idées de liberté prévalent sur la réaction autoritaire. C'est pour cela que nous sommes confiants. Dans notre espace, comme je vous l'ai dit tout à l'heure, la CEDEAO veut construire un espace démocratique où règne dans les 15 États la démocratie. Et chaque fois qu'un État sort de ce cadre, évidemment, nous prenons des sanctions, nous serrons les coudes pour que cet État soit ostracisé, pour que cet État, cette expérience de coup d'État militaire échoue, pour que les peuples continuent leur marche vers la liberté et le bien-être. Voilà, Madame, merci.
Thank you. If I could direct one to you, Ms. Botchway, the rise of China, the power that they exert, and perhaps the fact that their economy is doing better than so many other countries, does that call democracy's prestige into question, do you think?
So the question you're asking is whether the end justifies the means. Is that, am I getting it right?
Yes. I mean, they have
That
a very
they've been
different.
able, yes, they have their own kind of democracy which works for them, and they're doing well.
Yes, but they, don't have the same levels of press
But they don't
freedom.
exactly. I think the example of China is an interesting one. And yes, they are doing extremely well. The West and other countries might not subscribe to their kind of democracy, but the important thing is, first of all, what do the Chinese people think? Have they all agreed to their form of governance, their form of democracy? And if so, then I think that it's working for them. Bringing it into our sphere, and I use the Africa for example, there are several other countries within, even within Africa, that do not subscribe in that tailor-made form of democracy as we want to call it. But I think that they are working well, and they are hailed by the West and others. So really, yes, we have subscribed to democracy as that form of governance, but it has to be tweaked. It has to be tweaked for it to work for us. And in some places, you, you have the strong institutions, which should be the case for all. And in some places also, you have strong men, and it works for them. So that, the jury is really out, still out for whether or not that straitjacket that we call democracy, or the tweaked version, is what we should subscribe to. I think that it depends on the country, it depends on the citizens, it depends on their past, it depends on where they want to go to, and so on and so forth. I mean, you take Singapore, for instance, in those days, the days of Lee Kuan Yew. Yes, they had their own form, but it leaped them into industrialization, into development, and today Singapore is a very well-respected and country. So, yes, it depends on the country, and like I said, their past, where they want to go to, and so on and so forth. So, if it works for the Chinese, yes, and I think it does work for them. And it has pushed them into being this big power that we all want to be friends with.
Because they make good trading partners.
Exactly.
Mr. Khadka, I see you nodding your head as well. What do you think? Do you think that the way democracy is viewed in each country is different? Can democracy be tailor-made for a specific country, or does that mean it's no longer democracy?
I think there is no set world model of democracy. You know, every country can tailor-make its own model of democracy, the way its culture, its society, its economy, its history embraces. Sometimes, like we try to copy the best practices model, in the name of the best practice model from, let's say, the most developed country. But that developed country's democratic model, that is the outcome of several hundreds of years of experience. It was not created, on a single day. But here we try to copy every element of that kind of very mature democratic model into a particular country, and its system, its tradition, its belief, its economy perhaps doesn't quite accept it. So, it has to be modified in a way that it works to the best possible scenario of a given country. In Nepal also, the current multi-party democracy is an inclusive one. It is based on social justice, and it also provides political space for every section of the society. But then, as I said, there is so much competition for power from every kind of section, because political power is so precious. It is the ultimate source of, let's say, prestige, position, wealth, etc. And as you know that, there is a built-in cycle between power, wealth, and position, and back to power. So I think each country can have its own democratic model, but then at least some of the basic elements of democracy should be there. Like the rule of law, it must be there. Political parties must exist. There must be free press. Fundamental rights and the freedom of people must be respected. And there should be separation of power and independence of each branch of the government. If those basic elements of democracy are accepted, and then parts of it in totality, this is the total picture of a democratic model, but the parts of the internal parts of the system, it could be tailor-made, like what kind of rules and regulations are to be framed, what kind of local government, what kind of power should be given to the local government, how the coordination between the different tiers of government should be regulated. So I think each country can have, but then there is there is a defined territory of democracy. If that defined territory of democracy is not there, then it turns to be an authoritarian or a semi-authoritarian or a one-party kind of rule. So I think every country can tailor-make, but then the basic tenets of democratic models should be there. Without that, you can't call it a democratic system. Thank you.
So, Mr. Masudu, I'm going to ask you a slightly different example. When we look at Russia, definitely not a democracy, but they seem to have no regard for the international rules-based order built by other democracies, as we see their actions now in Ukraine. If international democracy and diplomacy can't stop a country like Russia from invading another country, is democracy really as powerful as we think?
Merci. Je voudrais d'abord rappeler que dans nos différents pays, la démocratie procède à succéder à l'échec des régimes autoritaires. Dans tous nos pays, c'est la révolte des peuples par rapport à l'échec économique et social des régimes précédents, des régimes autoritaires, souvent militaires. C'est ça qui a amené la démocratie. Donc cet échec-là, c'est celui-là, échec économique, échec social. Et évidemment, chaque pays a sa culture démocratique. Elle diffère d'un pays à un autre, mais il y a des fondamentaux. Il faut que dans un État, pour qu'un État soit démocratique, et ça c'est valable pour tous les pays, quelle que soit leur culture, il faut que le pouvoir exécutif procède d'élections libres et démocratiques. Il faut qu'il y ait une presse indépendante. Il faut qu'il y ait une Assemblée nationale qui procède, elle aussi, d'un Parlement qui procède d'élections et qui contrôle l'action gouvernementale. Il faudrait une justice indépendante. Donc cela doit être commun. Sans cela, quelle que soit la culture, au nom des cultures différentes, on ne peut pas dire qu'on peut faire une démocratie sans l'existence de ce genre de paramètres. Donc c'est pour cela qu'il y a quand même une universalité de la démocratie. En ce qui concerne la situation internationale, la situation de l'invasion de l'Ukraine par la Russie, il va de soi que le monde aujourd'hui doit être organisé dans la communauté internationale sur la base de principes, notamment la Charte des Nations Unies, où chaque État, petit ou grand, est indépendant et sa souveraineté est garantie par le droit international. Quand un État, parce qu'il est puissant, envahit un autre, il y a violation du droit international, violation de la Charte des Nations Unies, et il va de soi que si on banalise, ça se banalise, il n'y aura plus de communauté internationale, ce sera la loi de la jungle au plan international. Et le rôle de la démocratie, le rôle de la diplomatie, c'est de consolider le droit international, c'est de faire en sorte que les peuples vivent libres et égaux en droit, et que les peuples vivent en paix, et que la garantie de paix soit la préoccupation du monde entier. C'est cela qui doit être les règles communes de vie dans l'humanité actuelle. Et effectivement, nous sentons que de plus en plus, cette communauté internationale marque des reculs par rapport aux règles de droit. Merci.
Thank you. Mr. Khadka, if I can ask you, Nepal, as we've discussed, has had some democratic instability, government instability. How difficult does that then make it to attract international investments? Is democracy and a stable government really the foundation that international investment requires? Do you find it more difficult?
Yeah, thank you. That's very right. To attract foreign investment and also technology into the country, uh, political, there must be political stability, and the rule of law must exist and must be abided by the institutions, by the leaders, political leaders, by the civil servants, and by people across the spectrum. Um, Also, the rules and regulations must be transparent. They must be based on certain standards and norms which are acceptable to them, and they must be implemented very seriously. In many countries, what happens is like, you know, we have the finest rules and regulations, and we have all the required laws, but because they are not implemented seriously, or there are bureaucratic and other hurdles or legal hurdles in between, and that's why there builds some kind of hesitancy for the foreign investors to come. So definitely foreign political stability is definitely one thing. And then also like the rules and regulations should not be changed with the change of government. Because when one party comes, it is very friendly to attracting foreign investment. Another party comes into power, it changes some of the laws or regulations. And this also creates like suspicion and uncertainty in the minds of the investors. So I think there has to be stability in the government, stability in policies. If the policies are not stable, if the policies are interpreted according to the whims of the people in the government, then they shy away. The foreign investment, you know, gets shied away. So, but then I think there are, in addition to this, there are also many other factors like, you know, there is the infrastructural networks, um, and a very friendly business atmosphere should also be there, um, and the overall business policy of the government should be very, very investment friendly to foreign investors. Uh, but then, yeah, coming to your point, sure, with instability also creates uncertainty for the foreign investment to come into Nepal.
And then that then creates more instability, doesn't
Yeah.
it? It's a vicious cycle. Ms. Botchway, I want to ask you, Ghana has obviously had its past, but if I'm not mistaken, has organised 7 successful democratic elections in recent history. So what needs to be done in countries to allow for a return to democracy if they have had instability in the past, and how do you move on with a form of reconciliation?
So first of all, I believe one of the key um, things to look at and to pay attention to is a country that can really look at its institutions and build strong institutions. Institutions that would ensure that the citizens um, are assured of their freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of association, and so on and so forth. Also, institutions that make sure that the human rights, the basic human rights of people, are provided for. Institutions of the rule of law, the courts, and so on, that people feel that they are protected, that they have a constitution that they can all buy into. So for us, that is also important. Then the issue of elections, that people feel that when they go to the ballot, their ballot will reflect the true picture of what exactly is happening, and therefore empowerment of the people, that elections will be free, fair, and credible. that political parties also feel that they can express themselves and they can work within the confines of the law without fear of being victimized. So these are some of the things that go into ensuring that you have a strong country in terms of moving forward and building on your democracy. Of course, another area is a free media, very important, and civil society must be able to thrive without feeling that they will be intimidated for a position that they have taken. So I believe these are some of the things that must be in place, and that is what Ghana has done, and that is what we continue to do. Sometimes it can be very frustrating for a government, and I take the example of our government in our earlier, not too distant past, when we took out the criminal libel law, we repealed it. It meant that journalists, the media can go about their work without being penalized for anything that they have said. Today, it is difficult. It is difficult because probably we have too much freedom of the press. But we believe that it is something that is critical to our democratic journey. And it's only through that that we will be able to grow. And so these are things that some countries might find quite difficult to do, but in order to be able to make progress in democracy and your development, you must be able to put these in place so that people can feel free in order to grow and to develop.
Strong points. I'm going to open it up to our floor now, and I'm going to invite our first responder from the floor, Richard Girogossian, who is the director of the Regional Studies Centre in Armenia, for a comment. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Melinda, and to the panel. I think one thing is most clear, taking away the insightful discussion and presentations, is that there cannot be security without democratic governance. Yet, each of your countries is on the front line of democracy and facing economic challenges. It's very much about empowerment. And unfortunately, much of Africa and Nepal are often obscured behind the headlines. But in terms of a true commitment to the institutionalization of democracy, to people power in its true sense, I do think we have to be reminded that the front line of democracy is especially marked by each of your country's achievements. One question, however, would be, to what degree is regional cooperation an answer and a response to the insecurity and the threat from authoritarianism? And when we then turn to the audience for questions, one request is to kindly identify yourself prior to posing a comment or question. Thank you, Melinda.
Thank you. And I open it up to our panel to respond to Richard if anyone would like to jump in.
Yeah. Let me say that, first of all, no country can live as an island. No country can live in isolation. And I take the example of West Africa. It would be very difficult for any of our countries to live outside ECOWAS. And I say this because security is key for us. We have 3 of our countries that fall within the Sahelian region: Niger, Burkina Faso, Nigeria. And security is a major issue for us. No one country can fight it on its own. It has to be a concerted effort, which is why ECOWAS is looking at ways in which it can fight terrorism and is working with the Central African Group, ECAS, to fight terrorism. So it's extremely important. Even now, in terms of development, in terms of economics, in terms of trade, countries have to come together in order that they can make strides. And that's why we've come together as ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States, where we are looking at ways in which we can pool our resources together. We can have enough infrastructure which will move goods, services, and people in order that we can develop. And then, of course, we've even gone further to do it for Africa, where we have the African Continental Free Trade Area, which means that the whole of Africa is being linked together economically so that we be able to trade with each other. Because we look at trade outside countries within Africa with, say, the EU, forms over 70%. Within ourselves, it's about 15%. That is not good enough. So on all fronts, we need to be able to work together. Even with the issue of West Africa, we're coming up with the ECOWAS Standby Force, pulling our forces together in order that we can train them, we can share information, share intelligence, to stem the tide of not just even the terrorist surge that is coming towards us, but also even maritime security, cyber security, and other forms of security issues, threats that we are facing. So yes, there's a need to work together, and no country can go it alone.
I believe you looked as if you wanted to respond to Richard's answer as well.
Bien, donc je complète l'intervention de Madame. C'est que dans notre espace en Afrique de l'Ouest, nous sommes en train de construire une architecture commune et une économie commune avec la libre circulation des biens et des personnes. Et nous sommes en train de, pour compléter cette intégration économique, nous sommes en train d'aller vers une monnaie unique, une monnaie commune au niveau de la CEDEAO. Donc vraiment, je pense que c'est un des espaces au niveau africain le plus intégré. Évidemment, nous avons aussi des problèmes de sécurité, mais avec les problèmes de sécurité, nous ne renonçons pas au développement. Un pays comme le Niger, le terrorisme, l'insécurité liée au terrorisme nous coûte 2 points de PIB par an. Avec tout ça, les 10 dernières années, nous avons une croissance de 6%. Nous pensons que les prochaines années, nous ferons encore une croissance supérieure malgré la situation sécuritaire. Évidemment, nous menons de front la lutte contre le terrorisme, mais aussi la lutte économique pour le développement, en créant un espace compétitif, attractif pour les investisseurs. Vous savez que nous progressons tous les jours, chaque année, par rapport à l'indice de la Banque mondiale, l'indice de Doing Business. Donc nous essayons, avec nos autres partenaires de la CEDEAO et au niveau de chaque État, de construire un espace beaucoup plus solide, tout en luttant contre le terrorisme. Ces deux combats se mènent de pair et ensemble. Voilà ce que je voudrais ajouter sur la question de monsieur.
We've got another question from the floor. We might do. Oh, yes, please. Sorry, my apologies. Okay. Yes, indeed. I'm just keeping an eye on the time, so okay. We've only got about another 10 minutes.
Yes, I think democracy is the best guarantor of security if it lives up to its expectations. Security has two dimensions. One is internal security, the other one is external security. Internal security is the security of all its citizens. And if the citizens of a democratic country feel fully secured in terms of their trust in the government, in terms of the delivery on the promises made by the police and the government, in terms of like their economic security, their political security, their cultural security, their emotional security. If citizens feel fully secured, then it gives the bigger impetus for external security. And for external security, all the political parties across the board, they must have a consensus. Without consensus, external security cannot be had. And for external security, I think all the ongoing changes in the regional, in the neighborhood environment, in the regional environment must be studied and examined thoroughly. And whatever challenges are going to come, it has to be perceived and it has to be countered accordingly. And for that, the government must have support from the people, as well as there must be a consensus among all the political parties. Without the consensus in a democratic polity, security, external security is very difficult to maintain.
Thank you. We've got a question on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon to the panel. I'm Fonte Akum, Executive Director of the Institute for Security Studies based out of South Africa. I would first of all like to thank Her Excellency Minister Bochwe for her tenacity in mediating a return to constitutional order in countries where coups have taken place in West Africa. And I have a twofold question. The first one is, can coups be predicted and therefore prevented? And if so, what can be done better to prevent coups in West Africa and on the continent in general? And the second question is, we have heard a lot about the importance of institutions, but there is equally a question about public service delivery in most African countries. How important is local governance and decentralization to the effective operationalization of democratic governance on the continent? Thank you.
Great questions. Thank you.
Your first question is a very difficult one, whether coups can be predicted and preempted. I say that because all countries are sovereign countries. And so looking in from outside can be a bit problematic. Why do I say so? Because you could be seeing things that those who are inside the country cannot see. And I'm using ECOWAS once again as an example, and the typical issue of what happened in Guinea-Conakry, because the incumbent changed the constitution in order that he could go a third term. Constitution prescribed that it was a two-term limit. It was changed. It was so clear from everything which was happening internally, the demonstrations, even during the referendum, the people who lost their lives as a result. Looking in from outside, it was very clear that this could happen. But then for those inside, they felt that they had it all figured out and everything was okay, and they were bent on going ahead to do it. So yes, it can be predicted, or you can see that this is the path towards, this is what is going to happen. This may happen. However, it would be difficult for you to step in because these are sovereign states. And so a lot of engagement is done behind the scenes. ECOWAS countries have all signed on to the supplementary protocol on democracy and good governance. And so when something like this happens, yes, you do all the behind the scenes maneuvers, but then if the person or the people, the government is bent on going ahead, it becomes very difficult for you to preempt it. Now, what ECOWAS is doing is we are amending our protocol, which will put in place specific measures that the authority of heads of states can embark on when they see something like this happening. Typical example also is the issue in what happened in Burkina Faso. It was clear from the way things were going and the deteriorating security situation that something of the sort could happen. However, at the time, the government in Burkina Faso felt that they had it all covered. And therefore, what could you do from outside? It is a difficult one. So that's why I say it's a very difficult, problematic thing to do in terms of preempting such situations. Yes, you can predict it, you can see it coming. Demonstrations happened in Mali. It was clear that this was the path that it could take. But what do? You sit at the table, this is where diplomacy comes in, you try and resolve the issues with the different sides. But then, if the military decide to jump into the fray, then it becomes difficult to stage a coup. So the dynamics are very difficult to actually see your way clear when these things are about to happen. The issue of local governance is extremely important. We need governance at the local level. That is the only way that people feel that they are included in the government of a nation. And that's very important for us in Africa, because we have a very youthful population. The population are very youthful, under 30, many of them educated, they don't have jobs. They are frustrated. And so involving them in governance, even at the local level, is extremely important. So that's what I can say on this matter. I'm sure the others will add to it.
We started slightly late, so we only have time for one more question, but I know lots of people are putting up their hands. So maybe we'll take one from the front here, and if we can keep it quite brisk, maybe we might be able to take two.
I'm Associate Professor Elame Ece Tepecikloğlu from Yaşar University, Turkey. My question would be to the distinguished Minister of Foreign Affairs from Ghana. Dear Minister, you said that security is the key for democratic governance, of course, and the role played by ECOWAS is also critical in this sense. And as a Turkish academic, I was wondering what you think about the role external powers can play in this regard. I mean, you know, as a country fighting with several terrorist organizations, unfortunately for decades, both within its own border and outside. Turkey has quite a lot of expertise in this field, you know, and it has been providing military cooperation in different African contexts. So do you think the role played by those external powers, including Turkey, would be welcome in terms of security cooperation? Thank you.
Yes, I think so. It's important when we have all kinds of issues, the role, whatever role form it takes, whether it's a diplomatic role, whether it is helping in strengthening institutions, whether it's a role of strengthening our military capabilities. These are all different kinds of roles. Even the role of investment and trade and investment and strengthening your economy. These are all different kinds of roles that partners play, even in terms of helping with aid. But we believe that trade rather than aid is what is important. But there are several roles that international partners can play, and yes, very much welcome.
I might be getting myself in trouble, but I'm going to take one more question. Yes, this very keen lady at the back. Thank you.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you so much for your time and for being here, sharing your valuable insights with us. My name is Melda Küpeli. I am studying international relations as a master's student. My question is related to the rising financial power of China and the human rights dilemma. As you know, China has increased its foreign investments, especially within African countries. However, on the other hand, there are also a lot of human rights violations against minorities, like the Uyghurs in China. So my question is, how do you think what is the ideal foreign policy when it comes to the relationships between China and for African countries, and what could be done for democracy and human rights? Thank you.
If anyone on our panel wants to briefly, we are running out of time, take that answer. Either one of our African counterparts, is it going to...
Yes, I believe that Africa has a strong, countries in Africa have a strong relationship with China, but this does not stop us from speaking out against human rights, if there are human rights abuses anywhere, including China. There's different fora which present us with opportunity to speak out. We are on the Human Rights Council, we are the United Nations and all of that. And so if the need arises, which has happened in many cases, we do speak, even bilaterally, on a bilateral level, we have raised these issues with China. So this does not mean that because of the strong relations we have with China, we overlook everything, or, you know, so I think that we are doing what needs to be done.
We'll just take one final question from this gentleman on the floor, and then we will have to wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Professor Ibrahim Afal. I'm from Senegal. I think that good governance has 2 feet, whether it is at the national level or at the global level. The 2 feet are legality and legitimacy. Sometimes they go along, but many times one goes one way and the other goes other way. At the global level, the legality is the charter of the Union, of the United Nations. But the legitimacy is down because the way in which the Security Council is organized. It has no legitimacy. And the conflict which is going now between Russia and other countries clearly indicate that the Security Council cannot work because you have the veto. And it does not represent the world as it is now. At the national level, as referred by Her Excellency the Minister of Ghana, you have the conflict between the legality, which is that the country is sovereign, and the legitimacy, because some heads of state are manipulating the constitution to stay in power.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir, because we are running out of time. If you have a direct question to either of any of
I am contributing. I am not giving any question.
Okay, thank you very much.
Stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution. I'm sorry, we will have to wrap it up because we are over time. I know that there is so much to discuss and so much to say, but thank you all for your attendance, and especially to our esteemed panelists, thank you for your contributions.